So tonight, our local home energy experts, Ben Scott and John Spillman, are being joined by Lance REF. I may have mispronounced that, and I apologize if I did. He is the lead electrician for True South Solar, and True South Solar is a new sponsor of the Ashland Climate Collaborative, and we thank them for their support and expertise. Please note, ACC does not endorse or have exclusive agreements with any businesses, although we do vet and maintain a list of trusted contractors, and you can find those on our website. Please tonight type your questions into the chat as they occur to you. We're going to monitor the chat room and ask questions at the end of our short opening presentations, kind of the thing that we always do. And tonight's webinar is brought to you by the all-volunteer Electrify Ashland Now action team of the Ashland Climate Collaborative. And ACC is a hub for community collaboration to reduce our climate footprint and build a more equitable and resilient Ashland. And you can learn more about the collaborative and about Electrify Ashland Now at ashlandclimate.org. Lori, our board president of ACC, she's waving, is going to be putting the links that you're hearing about tonight in the chat room. So if you want to rewatch videos or dig into something deeper, those links will be there for your convenience. Okay. We have, in addition to Electrify Ashland Now, we have action teams that work on transportation issues, particularly around biking and walking, helping people get out of their fossil fuel cars. Food composting, because methane is created when we throw food into our landfills, and water conservation. Those are all linked through the ashlandclimate.org website. I'd also like to ask for your help. Will you please help publicize our upcoming community discussion on how the Inflation Reduction Act can help Ashland's businesses and organizations? So a little different focus, not our homes, but our businesses and organizations. So if you are a business or owner or belong to an organization, we would invite you to share that information. We're going to have a guest speaker from the national organization that helped draft the Inflation Reduction Act. That's rewiringamerica.org. And that meeting is Monday afternoon, February 27th at 3 p.m. And registration is through ashlandclimate.org. We don't have the link up there yet, I think, but it will be very quickly. But as noted, our topic tonight is electric panels. And we consider this a really important first step in your journey to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by eliminating natural gas equipment, upgrading to more energy efficient systems such as heat pump technology, and adding resiliency to your household. And we hope that this information empowers you to begin your journey, because what each of us does makes such a big difference. According to Rewiring America, on average, an estimated 42% of energy-related emissions come as a result of the choices that we all make. How we heat and cool our water and our air, how we cook food and dry our clothes, how we get to work and to school and social activities. But I always think this is good news. This means that if we created it, then we can control those emissions. They're within our power to do something about it. So feel empowered, because we really can make a big difference. Okay, tonight we're going to start by covering the basics of electrical panels. And then we're going to walk through how heat pump technology can reduce your energy needs, perhaps enough so that you can avoid electrical panel upgrades, which would be great. And then we'll discuss how to prepare for solar panels to meet your present and future electrical needs. We'll talk a little bit too about how there's money to help with a lot of these projects. So tonight we're going to start with a quick 2-minute video of electrical panel basics, and John Spillman is going to introduce this video and play it for us. John?
Thanks, Candace, and thank you to everyone for joining us tonight. And as we're talking about electrical breaker panels to help you prepare for your future electrical upgrade projects, if you're thinking about a heat pump for your heating and cooling, or a heat pump water heater, or adding solar photovoltaic system. Now, your electrical panel may need some upgrading to accommodate the new systems you want to install. And that's particularly true in older homes that may not have had any upgrades. They may have breaker panels that don't have enough capacity or don't have enough space to add new circuits. And the good news is that the Inflation Reduction Act not only provides incentives and discounts, tax credits for electrification systems, but it also offers additional incentives to help offset the cost of any electrical work that may need to be done to your house when the work is being done to support those systems like heat pumps, water heaters, and so forth. So to get us started on this topic of electrical breaker panels, we have the short video that'll give us a primer on the basics of electrical breaker panels. So let me go ahead and I'll share my screen and we'll get that video rolling. So this video is hosted on this website called The Spruce. And there'll be a link to this video, as Ken has mentioned, if you'd like to watch it afterwards.
Circuit back on or to shut one off to do some work. So let
me start.
Everyone needs to know what a breaker box is and what it does. You'll be here to flip a circuit back on or to shut one off to do some work. So let's go through the basics. A breaker box is your home's electrical service panel. It receives incoming power from the electrical utility and then safely distributes it to all your various circuits throughout the home. The main circuit breaker is usually located at the top of all these branch circuits, and it cuts off power to the entire house. It's rated for 100, 150, or 200 amps, and it's always 240 volts. The individual branch circuits cut off power to each individual circuit. They're rated for 15 or 20 amps. Amperage is the capacity of the circuit and determines how much power the circuit can handle before the breaker trips. Your higher amp circuits are usually reserved for your high wattage appliances like your oven range or your air conditioner. Another important thing, this is the front cover. This is what they call the dead front cover. The dead front cover should never be removed by anybody but a professional. Behind here is the incoming wiring from the electrical utility and all the wiring to the individual circuits. Now, before you start work on any circuit throughout the house, make sure you shut off the power here at the breaker box. And for safety, don't ever touch a breaker if you, the ground, or the panel are wet. If a circuit breaker trips, it's usually due to a fault, a short, or a circuit overload. Just come to the box, find that circuit, flip it back on. You can use the main circuit breaker to cut off power to all the individual circuits. But remember to bring a flashlight with you because the house will be dark after you shut that off. First, shut off all the individual circuits one at a time. Move the main circuit breaker switch to the off position. When you come to turn the power back on, turn the switch back to the on position and then individually turn all the circuits back on. For safety, stand to the side of the breaker box, wear safety glasses, and turn your head to the side. This will help you avoid any possible electrical flash or spark. Remember, never remove the dead front cover. If the main breaker or an individual breaker is tripping repeatedly, that's time to call in a professional because that's a sign of a more serious problem.
Candace, back to you.
Well, thanks so much. And one of the things that I noted in that was the very top switch where she put her hand a couple times said 200. And I think that's a really crucial piece of information for people to know that they have a 200, I think it's amp circuit ability for their house. And I think that's one of the key pieces of information that you need. And I think we'll get to that further in the presentation, but it's that top switch that will tell you what you've got coming into the house. And then it's all divided up among your various circuits and your equipment. So thank you so much for that introduction. And for people who want a deeper dive on this, they're really into it, Lori is going to include a chat in the chat room that you can copy and watch for that later, as well as this short video. So now that we know a little bit about how panels work, Let's talk a little bit about how are we going to pay for any necessary upgrades to the panel, to add a circuit perhaps, or to add new wiring that will take new equipment into that panel. Ben, could you cover how the Inflation Reduction Act rebates and tax credit incentives work in this area?
Yes, thanks, Candace, and good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us again. We've talked a lot about the Inflation Reduction Act, and just a quick recap. This is a lot of money that's going to be made available. This bill was passed in September, and it's what was formerly being worked on as the climate bill by the Biden administration. So now it's called the Inflation Reduction Act. It's really large. There's quite a lot of money for individual households. And this will include, and in some cases, fully cover the cost of home electrification upgrades. It's going to be made up of upfront rebates or discounts or tax credits, depending on income. So there's incentives to cover electric heating and water heating equipment. Mostly we're talking about heat pumps when we're converting from gas equipment to electric. Water heating equipment, I mentioned. Other electric appliances too would include electric and induction ranges, electric and heat pump dryers. And there will also be monies available for what we call a shell or the envelope of the home. That's the weatherization around it. So those kind of improvements can also be included, and as well as already was mentioned, monies for electric panel upgrades and some of the necessary wiring if it's needed. There'll also be some other home-related energy incentives, including renewable energy. And Lance will be talking a little bit about the solar and possibly batteries. So there's really a lot in here for homes. Another nice thing to remember is this is a long-term program lasting 10 years. So it gives many of us the ability to do phased projects. It's hard to do all of these things at one time. So you might do energy efficiency upgrades with one part of the program, maybe then go to heat pumps or your renewable energy. Also, electric vehicle monies are going to be included. And all of these things are going to help us reach Ashland's Clean Energy Action Plan goals. And that's good to know because that's also long-term. We're talking about a decade, really. So there's also a lot more in this bill that benefits homeowners, but we're focused on the electrification part. John, can you pull up our calculator from Rewiring America? Great. So if you could just scroll up a little bit, this shows a little bit about the income qualification. So you can see, and there's a link to this calculator. You just simply plug in your zip code, if you're a homeowner or renter, your income, your tax filing status, and your household size. And you touch that calculate button, and you can go further down and see what kind of monies are going to be available. So there's two categories. These are the rebates. These will be upfront discounts at point of sale. And you can see what, just briefly, we won't go into each one of these, what some of those will be. And as John has mentioned, the good news is that it will include things like upgrades for electric panel, electric wiring. And then there's individual things such as appliances like electric stoves, heat pump water heaters, heat pump conditioning for heating and cooling, heat pump clothes dryer as well. And then there's some of the weatherization rebates that are discussed. So all of these will, in theory, be available before late 2023. We had thought they might be available sooner. And at this point, we do not believe they will be retroactive to January 1st. And I'll just make a note that that really won't be determined until the feds release the money to the individual state energy departments. So in our case, ODO, once the monies are available and they start releasing them, it will be their decision on how or if there's a mechanism for going retroactive on some of these. So if we scroll a little bit further, if you are in an income bracket where some of the rebates will not apply to you, then there's a number of tax credits for higher income people. And you can see a lot of what they are right there: battery storage, electric panel, new EVs, even used EVs. There's tax credits for the heat pumps again and the heat pump water heater. And of course, a big one that Lance will get into, rooftop solar installations. So that kind of covers very briefly what some of the amounts for upfront rebates and tax credits will be. And then if you want to know more, this is a great tool, this calculator, to plug in some of your own personal data and see what kind of incentives will be available for you or tax credits. That's pretty much it for me. Candace, I'll send it back your way.
Thank you. Appreciate that. That's a lot of good information. And we're going to turn it over to Lance, who's going to give us an overview about what your electrical needs are, specifically for solar systems. But he is a lead electrician and can answer lots of questions about your electrical panels. So throw those questions in the chat room. So Lance, as I said, is the lead electrician at True South Solar, and he has more than 1,000 solar installations under his belt. Pretty amazing. He designs and builds solar systems for both residential and commercial properties. And Lance is going to help us what we need to do to evaluate whether we're ready for a solar installation. Will you take it away, Lance?
Yeah, thank you, Candace. The biggest question that you probably need answered is, do you need to upgrade your electrical panel? And that is something that really depends on your current and future electrical needs and what your existing electrical system looks like. When we add solar, electric vehicle chargers, battery backup systems, or if you're replacing gas appliances with electric ones, there's electrical codes, fire codes, and calculations to consider. Most all of those codes are updated every 3 years. So even if your house was built just 5 years ago, there might be new additional codes. Most of us that have had a house built, bought and or electrically upgraded, mid 70s on, have a 200 amp electrical panel. And that's a 200 amp service from City of Ashland. And in general, this allows for 40 amps of solar to be directly tied into a breaker in that electrical panel. This, of course, changes if that electrical panel is already full or at maximum capacity, or it's outdated, or if you only have 100 amp service to begin with. So 40 amps of PV roughly equals 425 watt solar panels, which is about 8.5 kilowatts of solar. And that's pretty average size residential system. If you're adding more photovoltaics than that, there's multiple ways to accomplish this, but they are very individualized. This is roughly the same scenario for people switching from gas heat to electric heat with a multi-zone mini split system like I just did. You're probably looking at an increase of somewhere around 20 or 30 amps if your heat was gas before. So you have to kind of do a little bit of a load calculation or have someone do that for you. Next question. Yeah.
Can I ask you a quick question while you're talking? So you just did a ductless mini split and you said that there was an increased need of about 20 to 30 amps. So is 20 amps roughly one circuit breaker? I know I've seen that there's 15 and there's two 15s banded together. Help us out. I'm a neophyte on this one.
So it's 240 volt, and so it's like one of the double handled ones. And so for most houses, you probably have a gas furnace that doesn't take much electrical other than the igniter. But you probably have an electric AC pump or heat pump that's 30 or 40 amps. And when you go to all electric with a mini split, you're probably looking at about a 50 amp 240 volt system. So you're only going up about 10 or 20 amps on the actual electrical that you need to add in all heat with no gas.
Because you're taking away some need with the old system that you're removing.
Yeah, you're replacing.
You need a little bit more, but it's just an incremental step up.
Yes, but now you're not using any gas.
Right, of course. And you know, this, Lance, you raise an interesting point. Some people talk to us and they're concerned. What do they do if the power goes out and they have electrical heating? Wow, they're going to be really super cold. But you still need electricity to generate the spark that's going to ignite the gas in your system. So there really is no difference under that bad scenario of we lose power when it's very cold.
Yeah, I mean, if you just have like baseboard heaters or something like that, then you're out of luck. But if you have a gas furnace system that's forced air, you need the electricity to move the air and
Push
have it
the air
operate. Yep.
through. Yeah. Okay. Can I ask you another quick question about solar?
Yep.
So I had an electrician come and look at my box, and one of the things he said was, if you're going to consider putting solar in here, you need to ask the solar company, are they going to put it in at the top or the bottom of the box? And I didn't know why that is, and I didn't know how to proceed with other plans before knowing that information.
Yeah, and I mean, to be honest, as a homeowner and a client, you can count on the professionals to advise you properly. So, but the solar goes in the opposite end of the bus from the main breaker. So in the video we watched, the main breaker was on the top of the panel. And then the busing is the part, the metal that all the breakers attach to that distributes the power. And the solar goes on the opposite end. And then as you're producing solar, it's being used throughout your house needs. And if you're producing more than you're using, then it pushes back through your meter and you get credited to use at another time where you're using more than you're producing.
I see. So if we're thinking about, okay, I think I want at some point, maybe I know my furnace is getting to be older, and in a couple of years, I might want to replace it with a heat pump technology. And then I think I might want an electric vehicle charger or whatever. Would you advise at that point you bring an electrician in to just look at the whole situation and talk to them about your plans?
Well, in a perfect world, definitely. But getting an electrician these days to, actually come and just look at it and talk to you about it is harder said than done. I know when we send out solar advisor to go look at a potential job, one of the first things they do is look at the electrical panel. They start taking pictures. They start asking questions about, future needs. Because the last thing we want to do is go hook up into a system and then 5 months later, they're like, well, now we want batteries. And it's like, oh, well, we should have replaced that when we were doing solar if we knew this. Or, we're pretty much always taking into consideration that there's going to be electrical vehicle chargers added. That's a pretty normal thing as more and more available and the prices are somewhat coming down.
And I understand also you would have to have a conversation if people wanted to have the battery backup component to their solar system, right?
Yes, and it affects, yeah, and that's one of there's so many just variables, obstacles to how to build that best system for them. So, if you want your whole house backed up, then you're actually having an automatic transfer switch become your electrical service, and your existing electrical panel probably just becomes a sub panel. But if you're just backing up a few loads, maybe you don't want to back up your whole house because you don't need to, because power doesn't go out, for very long, except for in cases of emergencies. And then you're just backing up a freezer, refrigerator, maybe a garage door, so a few lights and plugs. Then you're going to interconnect your solar different in that case as well. So
Okay.
you do want to take those into consideration.
Okay. Lots of good information here. I really want to get to give everybody a chance to ask their questions. There's no question too big or too small. You've got these guys, they are experts. Hit them up. It's hard to get an electrician, but we got one in the room. So ask your questions, please. I know that somebody here has talked a little bit about adding in underfloor wire heating. And I wondered if you guys had any comments about that. Is that a good way to warm your home? How much electricity does that take? And I see that Doug Piper has his hand raised. Doug, do you have some experience with this?
Well, it's not encouraged in California, I can tell you that. California has a regulatory system called Title 24, and they seriously frown on electrical radiant floors because that's an inefficient form of converting energy to heat. That doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It's just that's an answer to your question. I wanted to ask Lance if someone takes a picture of their service panel in the dead panel and sends it to an electrician. Can an electrician usually tell them whether or not they have a 200 amp service already?
Yeah, especially if you include in that a picture of the meter.
Okay.
And if if it's an overhead service, then a picture of that mast as it goes up with the weatherhead and
Right.
the wires into it.
So
Usually
you wouldn't necessarily have to have an electrician come out.
to tell you if you have a 200 amp panel or not. No, sometimes
Yeah.
it's really obvious, especially if there is a main breaker in it that says 200, then that usually is
Thank
pretty
you.
clear. Mhm.
So are most of the people who might have to have an electrical upgrade those who are living in houses that are older than being built in the 1970s? I didn't say that very well. Are these for houses that were built prior to the 1970s? Those are the ones that may have, if they haven't had a significant upgrade, maybe needing to do something like this?
Those are the ones that are usually the, I would say maybe one in every 15 to 20 jobs that we do, we need to do a panel upgrade for. And it's usually an older home. It's usually a house that's been remodeled many times and just kind of added on to. A lot of times everything hasn't been done professionally, and it's, so then it's just kind of a red flag, like, oh yeah, we should replace this. A lot of times it's these older split bus panels that were really popular in the 60s and 70s, where there is no main breaker. There's an upper section for your larger loads, and then there's a breaker that's usually 60 amps that feeds the lower section, which is your lighting and just household plug loads. And we can, if the upper section isn't full, we don't have to replace that panel. We can add up to 40 amps in it. But if that upper section is full, we can't just move those loads down to the lower section because that has a 60 amp maximum capacity. So in those cases, a lot of times we end up replacing those. And, and a lot of times like 40 amps for somebody who's uses electricity pretty conservative or has a smaller efficient house, 40 amps is a decent amount. But I would say, a lot of houses use way more than that, especially, if you do have electrical vehicle chargers and you are all electric appliances. Maybe you have a hot tub, and maybe you have teenagers who do 8 loads of wash every week.
Yeah.
Then, if you're trying to actually have a net zero home, at that case, you might be adding more than that. And a lot of times the reason that we need to replace panels is because we just can't add more to it. And there's no way to do what we call a line side tap, which is where we actually add the solar to the main conductors that come in from the meter before they hit the main breaker, so that we're not attaching onto the existing busing. And so if there's room to do that and there's a safe way to do that, then then we can do that. But we can't always do that, and that's also another reason to upgrade a panel.
Mhm.
The other part about it's always how much does it cost, and so we always try to avoid adding any additional cost. But if someone knows that they're pretty borderline, when the federal incentive is 30% of your electrical panel if you're adding solar. So a lot of people look at it like, well, I don't have to do this right now, but I know I'm going to need to do this in the future because I'm going to be making these upgrades to electrical appliances. I'm going to be adding an EV charger. Maybe I'm adding a greenhouse or something. And so they just take advantage of at that time, not even because they have to, but because, well, I'm doing solar, I can get 30% of this covered. And that goes for the battery systems too. So that's the federal, incentive that makes that, really attractive to people if they have an older electrical system anyways.
Okay, this is Lori, and we're getting a lot of questions in the chat. So I'm going to bring Ben Scott back in onto the main screen. And John, if you want to participate as well, if you open up your video, I'll bring you in. Otherwise, I won't bother you. Well, we got lots of really good questions coming in here. So I'm going to do my best to help. There's one here, would like to know the current developments of electrical boilers, because we have a boiler system, low dust, but a gas boiler. Who wants to talk about boilers? Ben?
No, not me.
Here, I'm going to bring
not
John
sure
over. You understand?
I'm not sure I'm clear on what they're asking. New developments for electric boilers? Is that?
Yeah, that's what it says. Marjorie, maybe you want to add some more comments to explain that part of your question.
We replaced a big, our house was built in 1951. We replaced a big boiler with a smaller gas boiler. And we have, wall, heaters. We like the system, but I've looked up in the internet, and now there's electric boilers also. And I guess nobody's familiar with them, and I just kind of wondered if someone was.
I could speak to it just a little bit. It's kind of like an instant water heater in that way too, where the electric boilers usually they use a lot of electricity. So if you have the capacity to add one, then it is a neat way to use like those old, I'm assuming you're talking about like the old hydronic like radiators and stuff.
They're not the Victorian ones or whatever. They don't take a lot of space. They're just down along the walls. So, we like the system. And we use a heat pump for, and sometimes we use a heat pump also, mostly though for air conditioning if need be.
And then
I don't know.
This also relates to the floor heating, because some people, instead of usually the electric wires in the floor heating, usually people just use those for like a tiled bathroom or something.
That's what we have that for, just a bathroom.
And then a lot of it was popular for a while when gas was a lot cheaper to do the hydronic floor heating.
All right.
You would run that all through, and in that case, you would have usually a gas water boiler that would heat that water and move it around.
Right.
And sometimes there'd be an electric water heater to assist it, and there'd be electric pumps to help move it. But a lot of people who have tried to switch that over to being all electric for heating it have found that it's, some of those systems are like 90 amps of electricity, and that's,
not good, huh?
So I make a comment just that I appreciate this question, because I'm assuming you want to reduce your gas use, and it has been cheap for things like this. And as Lance pointed out, an electric boiler uses so much electricity that it's really inefficient. So heat pump technology could be your answer. There are combination systems that can heat space, heat water, and whether that can be recirculated into a radiant system, I'm pretty sure it can be. I'm not real familiar with it. It's not something we see much at all around here. That's not to say it can't be done and done efficiently, but again, I really appreciate the thought that you're trying to leave gas, but electric is really, really pricey and inefficient to do what you've been doing with gas.
We have a tankless for water, for water. I don't know if you've heard of any kind of converters to do the same thing for the hydronic. No, probably haven't. I haven't heard of it.
You can get a tankless unit that will do domestic hot water and be able to feed the radiators.
Huh.
There's combination systems, but again, and you're sticking with gas. The heat pump technology that Ben was talking about is being developed, and there are systems available for small spaces. And there's a lot of development work being done to be able to make those heat pump systems large enough to be able to heat homes. It's on the horizon, and there probably are some systems available, but it's early days, so they're going to be a little bit more pricey. But that is something that's definitely being worked on, because we, for the future, we need to move to heat pump technology for everything. And there's so many homes that are heated hydronically in this country as well as around the world that's coming.
So I brought Doug in here because he says he has some experience with hydronics, and then we're going to move on to the next question.
I just renovated a house in San Francisco with hydronic, and temporarily I used an electric boiler because my gas service was delayed indefinitely. The gas boiler was incredibly expensive. However, I designed that system to use eventually, when it becomes available, an air-to-water heat pump. Those are, as John was saying, they're in a sort of nascent state, but they have been advancing over the last few years. That's the sort of thing that makes sense. However, if you have the old-fashioned steam boilers in your house, a modern heat pump system you'd need either to combine that, as Ben was suggesting, with another heating system, or add radiators, because the water is generally cooler. It's not steam heat. One manufacturer that's fairly popular that makes air-to-water heat pumps is a company called Chilltrix. I believe they're out of New Jersey.
How do you spell it?
Chilltrix, I believe.
Okay.
So those are
maybe
products to look at.
I think what we should do maybe is get Doug and Marjorie together.
Right.
We can talk about this stuff.
Right.
Sounds pretty great, but it also sounds like it may be an unusual way of doing things here in Ashland. Lori, what was the next question?
Yeah, the next one is from Bonnie Johnson. I currently have 10 solar panels that seem to contribute about $7 worth of credits to my Ashland city bill. Must I have 28 panels to actually make a difference?
Well, 10 panels makes a difference, and it's as I was saying, it's hard to quantify exactly how much you're like. All of our modern solar systems have monitoring systems where each panel has a micro inverter, or they're stringed into an inverter that tells you exactly how much you're producing, reports every 20 minutes, you see the graph, you know exactly what's happening. With older systems, we didn't have the monitoring. And so it's a little harder, because as I was saying before, like your solar is feeding into your electrical panel, and your that electricity that's being produced by the solar panels is being used in your house. And so since that's being used, you're not using as much from the meter. So the only time you really see how much you're being credited by City of Ashland when your meter's rolling backwards is when you're producing more than you're using. So, you know, we get that question a lot, and if you have 10 panels and they're all working, then you're offsetting a decent amount of your usage. But if you want to, offset all of your electricity, it's going to usually take much more than 10 panels. I think like we do a lot of like just 12-volt systems on some of the newer, smaller, more energy efficient homes. We'll just do like a 12 panel system. And, some of those people are offsetting almost all of their usage off of just 12, new, highly efficient electrical panels. And other people it's not even covering half of their needs because they use a lot more electricity.
I
Okay.
always think it's a
Can I
good
comment?
idea to get the most efficient electrical systems installed and then think about your solar needs. Sorry, I cut you off, Lori. Go ahead for the next question.
I think actually
comment?
Bonnie
Could I
has,
comment quickly?
Sure.
Yeah, I lived in Josephine County. We had a farm, and putting 28 panels with True South Solar. And I love the way the Pacific Power bill ran. Every month it told you how many kilowatts you generated, how many kilowatts you used. They carried over the excess for a full year. And then the end of March, if you generated more than, so they covered you in the winter when you were generating less. And end of March, you went back to zero and you started over again. But we generated more than we used with our 28 solar panels. And it seems to me here in Ashland, in a fully insulated, new, remodeled, up-to-date house, that 10 solar panels is barely making a dent in it. And I try to be very careful. We have a heat pump, I keep the house cool. I don't use a lot of electricity. But I was just disappointed that this 10 panels weren't doing it for me. Okay, sorry. I won't go on anymore.
okay, so I'm going to go to the next question, which might be for Ben or John. What amps required for other heat pump systems such as appliances, oven, stove, dryer, and water heater? So if you were getting ready to go all electric, what amps would you want to go for?
Well, I know
Well-
for an induction stove, I can tell you that because I installed one myself, and it required a 40 amp circuit for a standard four burner induction with an electric oven. There may be some larger ones that would require a 50 amp circuit. Depends on the unit you buy.
Okay, any other
the heat-
I did
comments?
the same
Ben?
thing. Yeah, I did the same thing as John with an induction range. So the 40 amp circuit. I also installed a ductless heat pump, a small 1-ton unit that's on a 30 amp circuit. And just for the record, in some cases, you might have an existing air conditioner on a 30 amp circuit. And if you're replacing it and putting in a ductless heat pump, you may get by with that. If you're installing larger heat pump that requires an air handler, this would be for a forced air system. You might be looking at 40 and 50 amp circuits. The air handler itself might need a 50 amp circuit. So that's a couple of examples I've seen in my own house.
Okay,
And I want to just interject that Ben and I were talking about exactly this subject in the last couple of days, and we're trying to come up with a chart that talks about what you need associated with the various pieces of equipment. What you have to remember is that you'll also have to subtract anything that you remove when you replace. So it's an addition and subtraction to get to the bottom line. And again, I think an electrician is going to be good help there.
mhm. I love how every answer on these questions is really long. Like sometimes we do a webinar and the questions are short, but this is like, well, this is a lot of stuff. So I'm really glad you guys are here to help explain this to us. The next question is from Ray Millette he says he has a split box panel with no main breaker. To find out my service, do I just add the upper breaker ampacity? Who wants to talk about ampacity?
I got that.
Okay.
It's more than likely it is a 200 amp panel, and there's just a rule for all electrical services, and it's called the 6 throw rule. So you're allowed to have 6 service breakers. So in those split bus panels, there's 6 breakers on the top, and one of them disconnects all the rest of them. It's adding those up wouldn't tell you what size you have going into there, because it's probably a 30 amp dryer, a 30 amp water heater, maybe a 50 amp range. Maybe a heater or something is in there too. But adding those up wouldn't tell you. And a lot of times those will add up to actually more than 200. And that's just kind of the way it goes. If you have a 40 amp, like if you have a 40 amp breaker, it doesn't mean that whatever that appliance is, like for an induction range, which I just put in too and was 40 amps, the nameplate on it is actually 26 amps. But because it's considered a continuous load, you have to add 125% to it, which puts you over 30 amps. So you just go up to the next size, which is 40 amps. So the breakers don't say what it actually necessarily is. You might have a 20 amp breaker with one Christmas light plug on it.
Got it. Okay, did you cover the waterfront there, Lance, on that one?
I think so.
Okay, all right, because I got another one for you. With a solar/battery house system, is it worth the cost to have a span panel installed for ability to choose the circuits to be used while in battery mode? Are there better solutions than the span panel? And somebody better explain what a span panel is for those of us who don't know.
So, well, I'm not sure exactly what a span panel is, either.
Okay.
What that acronym is, but there are smart.
It's a brand of panel. It's called Span, and it's got computer-like connection, so you can pick the circuits that connect to the battery.
Oh,
Yeah.
Thank you, Philip.
Sure.
And so the other brands call them a smart panel. And smart panel, you can actually, and you see this typically with generators as well as with battery systems, where you can program it and it will as the battery is losing its juice, it will select the loads to start turning off. And you can program which loads are more important to you. They are spendy. Usually we try to just give people, instead of going that route, let's try to back up your whole house and spend that money on more batteries. And then you can, if there is a power outage, you can choose what you want just by using what you want or not using what you don't want to, and maybe turning off some breakers, like turn off your hot tub, turn off your water heater if you want to. So it's a little bit of a, it's kind of a if this then that situation, and you really have to look at what your needs are and then start pricing it and make that educated decision, like, well, what do we want, what is more convenient.
So Lance, have you installed any of these smart panels?
I have not with battery systems. I have with generators. I would say I've been with True South for a little over 7 years. So it was 8-9 years ago. I've done a couple of them here in Ashland. And I remember they were very, they're expensive, because they along with the panel goes an automatic transfer switch as well. And, it just, everything adds up. I couldn't actually price one of those out for you. But I feel like it was pretty close to the price of adding another battery to a battery system at the time of purchase.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, great. I want to try to keep us moving here because we have a number of questions and we're at 7:51. So Candace is going to have to tell us when we're going to stop taking questions and what we'll do if there are questions we haven't answered. So any experience from Sue Whiteman, any experience with the Rheem 120 volt plug-in heat pump water heater, also a heat pump dryer? Ben, can you unmute?
Yes, sorry about that. On the 110 Rheem heat pump water heater, my only experience is that I've had people say they don't recommend them too much because there's no electric resistance auxiliary heat. So you'd just be relying on getting your hot water from the way heat pumps work, transferring heat from one place to another and heating your water. It would be slow. And if you're not in a hurry to get your hot water, then fine. And it also does not require rewiring with 220 volt circuits. So some advantages, of course, but just be aware that there's that limitation too. You don't have the auxiliary elements for getting hot water faster if you have run out. On the heat pump dryer, my wife and I just installed one about 6 weeks ago. And so far we're extremely happy with it. It's really kind of remarkable how much less energy it uses than an electric dryer, which is what we had before. So we weren't converting from gas. And I don't know what else I can really tell you about it. It does require a 220 circuit, like most electric dryers. And we also had to replace the washer at the same time. So we have stacked units. They're compact, they're super efficient. And there's the sort of myth, if you will, that it takes forever to get your clothes dry. And, it's true that heat pumps can take longer to heat things because they're not generating heat, they're moving heat. In our case, we haven't actually found that to be so true. It seems like it's drying clothes pretty quickly. And on another note, I'm not particularly, impatient to have clothes dry. I don't need them in a couple of hours generally. So I don't know if that helps, but so far we're quite pleased with the heat pump dryer.
Excellent. Okay. Phil Barnhart asks, are there situations in which it makes more sense and costs less to share circuits between two functions? For example, an electric clothes dryer and a level 2 EV charger circuit. Only one or the other runs at a time? ? And somebody piggybacked on this. Ditto to Phil's question about sharing dryer outlet with EV. I have been charging my EV with a regular 110 outlet since September. That's Bonnie with that tip. Who wants to talk about that?
I'd love to.
Okay, Lance.
So the only way that you could share those is if you are actually unplugging your dryer and plugging in your EV charger to your dryer plug, which is pretty limited. It's the only way you can legally do that. Because those, NEC and fire codes, you have to base your circuit size and your wiring on whatever loads are connected to that. So you have a 30 amp plug with 30 amp wire going to a 30 amp breaker. So you could unplug it and plug in another one and plug something else in there. But if you tried to do some kind of off-griddy kind of hippie thing where you just have a switch where you would go between the two, you'd be breaking electrical codes. And so I wouldn't recommend it. And the inconvenience of that seems like a chore.
Okay.
Of, always unplugging one and plugging in the other. And then you're also limited with the 30 amp on an EV charger. You're limited to, I believe I want to say 24 amps of actual power, 240 going to your EV, which is, way better than 120 volts at 20 amps going into it, but not ideal.
Okay, great. Okay, look, we're almost done with these questions, Candace. I think we're going to be able to do this.
Good job.
Yeah, no, good job, panel. Marnie Koopman asks, she wasn't here at the beginning of the program, so this might be redundant, but I think we should ask it again. Are there any rebates available for upgrading your panel associated with a switch away from gas, heat, stove, dryer, etc., if the home already has solar or is not getting solar PV? Or is the cost of panel upgrade only covered when installing new solar? I think these are two different things.
I agree. I don't think there's an issue there. Whether you have solar now or not, and you need to do something to upgrade for something else, maybe it's a heat pump water heater, let's say. The monies, the rebates, as far as I understand, would still be available to you. I can check, Marnie.
Yeah,
Okay.
and Marty, we talked about this at the earlier part of the program. We're all a little disappointed that the rebates are seeming to going to take a really long time to get to people. So you need to know that the tax credits, everybody's feeling fairly confident that those will all be available throughout this year for you to take when you file taxes next year. But the rebates, you'll want to keep your ear to the ground on that. Thank you.
Great. And Amelia, this is, I think, our last question, and it should be short, hopefully, from Amelia to Ben. How did you decide what brand of dryer to purchase?
Oh, well, I watched the webinar that Electrify Now put on this very topic, heat pump dryers. That's the group up in Portland, Brian Stewart. And to be honest, he had, one of the speakers had a lot of charts and talked about the efficiency of different brands and how efficient they were at removing water from your clothes. And I don't remember the details, but what I remember was something in the chart caught my eye. And the brand that was associated with this chart and that it was efficient at removing water was an LG brand. I believe that's a South Korean make. So I just did a little research and ended up liking what I found out about it, read some reviews. I mean, I do a lot of things that other homeowners do. I read a lot, and I compared price to a couple of other brands, and it sort of came in the middle of pricing and function and features and all of that. Nothing more than that, really. I mean, it wasn't real scientific. I mean, I thought I was getting a highly rated product on the efficiency, and that's always important to me. And I'd say so far, that's shown to be true. It does seem to remove water from clothes efficiency using the heat pump technology. So maybe that will help.
It does. Thank you.
And
Sure.
what a wonderful segue. I did not pay Amelia to say that, to ask that question, but our next webinar, support webinar in February is going to be on heat pump clothes dryers. So you'll get really into it with that. This has been wonderful. Before we wrap it up tonight, I want to get Rick on board. We are going to draw the names of the 4 winners of the free 1-hour home energy audits. Those are going to be conducted by Ben and John. They're each given us 2 as a gift. They will reach out to the winners via email to arrange convenient dates and times for these audits. And we just want to thank John and Ben again for this incredible gift of time for the Ashland Climate Collaborative. Thank you. So Rick Bart, I'm doing the drum. And the first winner is
Pete
Catherine
Jackson.
Jackson. Yay. All right, winner number 2. This is my very high, carefully done selection process.
Brian Soul.
Brian Soul. Yay!
Yay.
Congratulations, Brian.
Third one is Linda Adams.
Linda!
Wow.
And the last is Ken Wiseman.
Yay! All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody. We hope that you're going to leave tonight with useful information. You feel empowered. If you have more questions, you can email them to us at info@ashlandclimate.org. We do our best to get those answers back to you as quickly as possible. And another quick plug, if you find these discussions useful and valuable, please consider supporting ACC with a donation of any amount so that we can continue to offer these free community discussions. They take a lot of work to promote and put on. And you can donate through our website. There's a donate button on there. Thank you again so much to our wonderful presenters, Lance, Ben, and John, who give so much of their time to help us create better homes and a better Ashland. Join us in February for the heat pump clothes dryer session and anything else. As you know, any question you want to bring to these meetings, we're happy to get it and we'll do our very best to answer. So thank you so much. This is an all volunteer organization and you're a part of it by being here tonight. We so appreciate you. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.